know thyself, taking a hard assessment of what your goals in life are and what makes you happy. Specific, what is your area of awesome? The things that you both love doing and you tend to be better at than other people. So that's one thing. And then paying a little bit of attention to your personality profile.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about folks who have been successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zaylor.
On today's show, we have Charlie Janes. Charlie, thank you so much for being on with us.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, Charlie. Thank you so much for being on the Road Less Traveled Show. Can you tell us a little bit about your former career and how long you were in that line of work?
Sure. Yeah. So I got into high-tech sales, transformative sales, selling to large enterprises, new ways of doing things to better serve their clients, to do things for less money, and just basically to grow businesses. So I did that for 25 years. And 3 of those companies, I grew my organization from almost nothing to over 100 million. And those companies had exits. They sold to companies like IBM, Oracle, Workday. And then the last 15 years, I've done really early stage startups where I was one of the first 5 employees and grew each one of those businesses to over 5 million. So it's been a real hoot. It's been things like artificial intelligence, data analytics, really cutting edge stuff. So it's been a lot of fun.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like a very interesting and, diverse background on that. What have you pivoted to now? What's your path you're on now?
Well, about 2 years ago, I finally decided, as great as it's been working for other companies, I wanted to start my own businesses. So my wife and I have started 2 businesses with a mission of creating jobs for others and enriching our community. So her business is a right at home, in-home care business, which she's grown from 0 to over 100 caregivers in the last 13 months.
Wow.
And my business is business coaching and executive coaching. So I work with really talented, driven people who have somehow hit a roadblock in terms of growing their business to the next level, or people that want to get out of operating in the business and start working on the business. And I also work with people who want to plan for that exit, getting a business ready for their children or for an outside management team or to sell it outright.
Right. Oh, very good. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, Charlie, in your days of high tech and different companies, is there a funny story that you can share somewhere along the way that made you scratch your head, go, "Oh man, I got to do something else. This is driving me crazy." Anything you can share?
Richard, there's so many of them. And the being part of companies that were growing fast and building their culture and working really hard and having it pay well, it was just a joy. Right. But I'll tell you, it was a grind too. And a lot of those businesses, I was on the road 80% of the time, even though I had small children. And and that's true of a lot of tech execs. So one of my favorite stories is just getting into a Marriott one night in a distant city somewhere about 9:30 at night. You check in, you're starving. So I order room service, eat it, just, get undressed, hop into bed, start to go to sleep. And then in the darkness, I can smell the food. So I get up and I take the tray and I put it out in the hallway and I'm holding the door shut with my foot. And wouldn't you know it, while I'm standing there in my underwear, I slip and the door closes. And just as the door closes, I'm in a corner and there's this other business person, a middle-aged woman in her raincoat, typical traveler. She hears the door close and she hears me say, "Oh, something." She looks over at me. She doesn't smile or anything. She just puts down her briefcase. She goes, "I'll be right back." She goes down to the lobby for me and she gets the hotel manager to let me into the room.
Oh, that was awesome. That was awesome.
Like she'd seen it before.
Yeah. What a nice lady. I remember one of my business trips. I was coming into, and again, I'm a Marriott loyal person, and I was the top level of Marriott, which meant you could technically, if you had a reservation and there was no room, you could technically bump somebody else, of a lower level. Well, anyway, I got to the hotel at about 11 o'clock at night, and there was my room. They gave my room away. I'm like, are you kidding me? What? So that was not a happy conversation. I wound up having, 11 o'clock at night, I wound up having to drive 10 miles away to another Marriott's, but they took care of me, but it was kind of like, oh man, at those hours, you don't need to be dealing with stuff like that. So.
Well, it's worth saying for the listeners is if you're not in a career where you travel a lot, it sounds really glamorous. And frankly, I loved it. No complaints. Yeah. But there are a lot of nights like that where you end up having, no place to stay, or you're driving around and you're tired. And
right.
So it's not all glamour for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, Charlie, what was a deciding factor in getting you to change from your startup, your tech jobs, to more the job you're focused on now? You mentioned some of it was the travel, 80% travel, and young kids at home. Was there something in specifically, or just cumulative over time you decided to make a switch?
It's a little bit more cumulative. So first off, tech sales is becoming more of a grind than it was. In fact, it was joy when we were introducing software development or analytics, and we were so revolutionary, and we were meeting these executives from companies. It was so exciting. But technology transformation has been underway quite a bit. And the way it's done now, the bigger companies are systematizing it, and they're taking more and more of the creativity out of the sales profession. And they're just kind of boiling it down into a step-by-step rule book. And for me, with my personality type, if you've ever heard of DISC profiles, I'm a high D, a high I. I'm motivated by finding new ways of doing things. So that's how I ended up with startups. But it become a lot less fun. And in tech right now, the average tenure for a VP of sales is something like 1.3 years.
Wow.
So you come home. In my case, I came home 7 times with a family that always saw me working, always saw me beating quota, and still came home unemployed 7 times, laid off or fired because of a reorganization. And it was soul sucking. Yeah. But the other part of it was, in my mid 50s, just wanting to create a legacy. So I mentioned before, my wife and I want to impact other people. So with our home care business, the way we're actually working it is we're hiring, caregivers tend to come from tough backgrounds often. Matter of fact, a lot of times they were young single moms and they're taking care of their elderly people, and they need to find a living. So they do what they do best. Mm-hmm. In that business, we're trying to give them ownership of the business. So as they step up into scheduling roles or manager roles, we're going to give them part of the business, and then we'll buy a new franchise and we'll just keep doing it. So that's our way of kind of leaving a ripple in the pond of a legacy through people's lives, families' lives, and communities.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, that's fantastic to be able to help nurture and grow somebody along the way with, owning a business is very rewarding. And, that's great that you guys are doing that. So again, very cool that you've got 2 successful businesses that you're both running. So that's awesome. So, So, Charlie, as you and your wife are moving in that direction of, your coaching and then the home care, were there some obstacles you encountered along the way?
Well, among other things, the fear of the unknown. So any of you listening to this podcast really is about the road less traveled and taking that big chance. It's hard for people to leave the known. In our case, we still walked away from very lucrative careers and a very comfortable life. And frankly, the last 2 years, besides spending money buying a franchise and literally paying people in the home care business, or in my case, just, it takes a couple months to start getting your first couple clients. So, you're just spending before the money starts coming in. And I think that's where we all have to admire the entrepreneurs who just said, to heck with it. I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to take the chance. I'm going to control my future. But that was certainly a big obstacle. Yeah. Other than that, though, it has been an absolute joy. I've never been happier.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
People forget that, the overnight success wasn't an overnight success. It took years and months and years of hard work trying to get there. And, a lot of money sometimes that you're putting out to really be in those positions. I mean, there are people who occasionally will strike it quick and fast, but typically it's a lot of work getting there. So, yeah.
It is. As a matter of fact, one of the things I want to mention to you is in my coaching business, you probably hear about business coaches and executive coaches all the time. Mm-hmm. And honestly, there's more of them out there than you can hit with a stick. And most of them should be hit with a stick, because a lot of them are just unemployed people who weren't good at their old jobs. So now they're going to coach others on how to be bad at their jobs. So the approach I took is I didn't want to be the guy who said, this worked for me. Back in my day, this is the way we did it. For one thing, business is changing so fast. The answers to questions you should be asking are changing really fast. Right. So what I did is I actually bought a franchise called Focal Point from Brian Tracy. So most people know Brian Tracy is one of the world's foremost business coaches. And he actually built a company around 250 coaches now globally, with whole libraries of coaching materials for business owners on one hand, executives. It's a completely different thing, coaching an executive working in a corporate world, training classes and assessments. So I bought all that intellectual knowledge, and I actually spent 20 days in certification training in my first year.
Wow.
So it's pretty serious. But so there's a very big difference of people's certification. And so I went for the master's degree, and I have an MBA to boot. So, I'm all about true creative transformation and really helping the best of the best.
That's great. So as you transitioned, you decided to go into the business and executive coaching. What was one of your first victories you can think of along the way? Was it your first client, or when did you know you made the right choice?
You know what? I made the right choice when I was going through certification with Focal Point. Mm-hmm. And there were 10 other people in my certification, and they were all very different than me. But, we learned the business together. We had to. And what was particularly rewarding and where I felt like I was making it is I was learning so many things. So imagine this. I've grown 3 sales organizations to 100 million. Every business I've ever grown has grown 50 to 600% in a year, except the year the dot-com bubble burst. So I've been really good. But going through this coaching, I learned so many things. And I actually figured out that I was actually bad at some things. Like in some areas, I had poor sales skills. I was great at organizing and leading, hiring people and training them. But on one-to-one selling, I had my skills had atrophied. So I learned so much. And it's fun to be in your 50s and learning. So, and then applying it, helping others learn it. So that was the big victory, was just learning so much new stuff and then having people be happy with it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you can tell your passion comes through for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, lifelong learning is so important. I think honestly, that's what keeps us young. That's what keeps us fresh. That's what keeps us, energized. And I want to learn something till I'm not here anymore. Just keep learning something new every day. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, so when people are out there thinking about their careers, you want to choose something, especially if it's a second stage career, that gives you more energy than it takes. Mm-hmm. And let's admit it, a lot of us now, especially in the era of COVID, of balancing life and things, there's a lot of stories about burnout. Something like Gallup says something like 81% of employees that work for businesses right now are either disengaged or actively disengaged.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So people are really burning out. So you really need to pick something that just gives you joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing also, and this is something we've talked about, and I'm sure you've had this thought cross your mind as well, Charlie. When you're working for somebody else, you're helping to build their wealth. When you're working for yourself, you're building your own wealth, as well as, you get energized from what you're doing. So, again, not easy to go out and start your own thing, but at the same point in time, it can be so rewarding. Yeah. So.
Well, it's a really, really important part of our economy as well. I've spent the last 10 years in artificial intelligence and automation, automating voice conversations specifically. I've done that with a couple companies. Order taking, with the machines literally talking to a person like Siri does, except it's programmed for business. So like it or not, more and more of the mundane aspects of corporate work is going away. Bain says something like 30% of those jobs by the year 2030 will be gone. But we also believe that they will be replaced with service-oriented jobs or value-added jobs. So the coaching I give young people, and I work with young people a lot. I work with foster kids. I work with single moms. I work with the entrepreneurial school at University of Colorado, which is where I got my MBA. And I talk to people about the fact that we, especially the young ones, is we have to find ways of creating unique value with what we do. Everybody has to. There's no such thing as job security.
That's right. I mean, again, as people are fighting for, I have to pay, minimum wage should be $15 an hour or whatever. Well, guess what? How many McDonald's, how many other fast food restaurants have you gone into where they're having kiosks now? Employers are finding ways to eliminate the high cost of labor in certain aspects, and that's not going to change. That's going to continue. I'm with you. I do believe that you're right. There will be new jobs that come about because there's always going to be things that have to be touched with hands or an interaction point between two humans. But the world is changing significantly, and folks in those fields need to learn and take some training to kind of be ready for that. So, yeah.
One thing I'll throw out there for any business owner or anybody that just wants to kind of know about the history of how new industries came to market and understand how AI is going to impact us is the AI revolution by Bill Davidoff. He's a premier venture capital for Wildcat Ventures. It's a fantastic book, but it actually takes you through the history of past innovation, how like automotive created jobs, but a lot of these high tech businesses now aren't creating jobs because they're creating so many free services. So most of us have to figure out ways that we can enhance these automated systems, by taking them to their final mile. So the book's a really great introduction to that.
Okay, nice. Charlie, in your new path, is there a funny story you can share?
More than a funny story, I have a fun story. Okay. So my wife and I were sitting on our front farm porch in Silicon Valley and she looked at me and says, Charlie, you're not having fun with this. And I was thinking about my next big thing. And I said, no, I'm not. So all I had to say to her was, no, I'm not. She said, you want to try something different? So she literally put the house up for sale, and she had a very good job. Mm-hmm. And it was sold in 2 weeks, and they wanted us out before Christmas. Mm-hmm. So we loaded the car up, and because this dog behind me here, the yellow one is my dog, Katie. You probably met her when you visited my house years ago. Yeah. She was 15 years old, so I couldn't put her on a plane. So we loaded the 3 dogs into the cars, drove cross country, picked our daughters up in Boulder, Colorado, and Madison, Wisconsin, spent Christmas in New York City with family, thinking that we had no idea where we were going to settle and start these businesses. So we literally traveled around the Northeast where I had lived and loved it, but we decided to kind of drive around the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And we spent New Year's up in Asheville near you, up in the Blue Mountains, and then down through Florida. And we just wandered around for 3 months. Mm-hmm. Meeting people. And when we got to West Palm Beach, we just happened to resonate with the liveliness of it and the diversity. And this was right before COVID hit. But we spent the 3 months just exploring and, really experimenting with choosing where we wanted to live and build our careers around that. And I highly recommend that for anybody that wants to make a change.
Nice.
Yeah. It's good. I mean, there's so, you mentioned before from the travel, all of us have extensively traveled. So it's good to get a feel. Like I said, there's a real sense of, you have to actually be boots on the ground for a little bit of time to get a feel for the community versus, all the hype and the latest best 10 places to visit or those kind of thing. I think it's like you said, it's very important to take your time and make that decision.
Yeah. But I do think that people do need to understand themselves well. Some people love change. So my wife and I had moved across country for job changes, and sometimes we just moved to try something new. We moved cross country multiple times for both promotions and speculatively. So for us, it wasn't unusual to go off and do this. And we have friends everywhere because we do it. For other people, they really value the long-term friendships they've had, and you should really pay attention to that. One of the funny things is so many people that move down here to Florida late in life move back. Yeah. Very late in life. Yeah. There's a huge boomerang effect. People that want to be back near their loved ones. So you should think about that too.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think in the kind of North Carolina, Tennessee, that kind of middle of the country belt. They called them halfbacks. I think they came down from Michigan, Ohio, down to Florida, and then too hot or whatever reason they moved halfway back. That didn't quite want the snow again, but a little cooler weather. But yeah,
That's right. Ohio's my home state. That's still
mine too. Yeah. Well, Charlie, where are you today in your journey on your new career path, and where you see yourself going? What's your ultimate goal?
It's so exciting. I passed the threshold of having 10 retained business executives and business owners that I work with on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, which is my capacity. Now they come and go, so I'm always looking for new business if anybody's out there. But what I'm doing is I want to expand my legacy. So now that I'm starting to get busier and develop a reputation, I've got a good number of 5-star reviews on Google, going for 20 before the end of this year. I want to start doing more one-to-many. So in this last couple of months, I've started offering online entrepreneurial growth classes and time management classes that groups of people can join, which makes it really low cost compared to retaining, which could be a couple $1,000s a month. I'm implementing software in my business for helping businesses align, especially with remote workers, things like employee net promoter scores, giving feedback to how happy they are in their role, figuring out how many are dissatisfied. So I'm pulling in my tech career into my coaching business and nice. that love. And then the other thing I'm starting to do is I'm starting to package some of my lessons for super low cost. And I'll be publishing them this year on a platform probably called Success U, where I'll give 7 minutes lessons, snippets of information on how to get better time management, or how to give a better sales presentation, or how to set goals. So the nature of my practice has evolved a lot in a year and a half.
Right. Nice.
That's
very
great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Keeps you fresh. So good.
A lot of people say I'm too fresh.
So Charlie, as you are building your legacy, and you talk about, I'm curious, what are there some things you do to give back? You mentioned working with foster kids. You mentioned, through the home care business, trying to help grow caregivers into some additional levels and, responsibility, things like that, perhaps even future owners. What can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there's quite a bit there. So I've worked with foster kids as a court appointed advocate. So I'm responsible for foster kids' healthcare, their education, overseeing the relationship with their family, their foster care. And then some time ago, when I left California, I was actually supervising 10 other court advocates. So I got pretty involved with the program. Since I've moved to Florida, I haven't got re-engaged with that, but I think I mentioned that I'm starting to coach through an organization called Hearts for Moms. I'm coaching, giving life skills training through that organization to single moms, career planning, goal setting, time management, the basics of communication, all the things we all need to succeed. And, a lot of these people weren't exposed to this through their families or other things. And it's a huge disadvantage in going and making themselves relevant as great parents or as future employees. So those are two causes that I work for. But I think the one that I'm most proud of is the work that my wife is doing with our business. Is we're putting our money where our mouth is. We could just be pocketing all of that money, but actually I think it'll be better business for us. We'll actually sell that home care business 3 to 5 years out. So by us not doing the work, and by having dedicated managers and schedulers that came up through the ranks, that are loyal to the business and to the cause, and maybe, want to own it themselves, or will own some of it and have skin in the game, we're completely changing the trajectory for families and communities. So this is a huge way for us as, relatively, we're not big fancy people, but this is something tactical that we thought of and we did. In 2 years, we've got 100 people employed for us, which is pretty amazing. And we we work hard on counseling them and giving them support when they have family issues. So we're trying to walk the walk.
That's great. I mean, it's the alignment of interests, right? They can see, there's a path to actual ownership that maybe, their only path to owning a successful business. I mean, and you give them the leg up, and they can obviously put all their effort behind that because they can see that the goal one day is achievable.
That's right. And some other opportunities for people out there, especially people homebound right now, is like the virtual assistant market is really growing. And if you're just doing tactical work, if you're just doing copying, collating, stuff like that for somebody, you're taking direction, well, that's going to be a fairly basic hourly wage. But there's a lot of people that have started these businesses that start becoming the personal assistant. It's really common in the coaching industry. Like I hate doing the invoicing. I hate doing the scheduling. I want somebody managing my calendar. I really want someone doing more and more so that I'm doing nothing but just coaching. Frankly, I don't even enjoy the selling. I love the networking and meeting people, but I literally get like a dopamine high when I'm with my clients, and I want more of that. So a good virtual assistant can help. So that's an example of things that women returning to the workforce can do. Well, not women, anybody. The reason why I mentioned women, by the way, is I'll tell you a quick story. So my wife was a Merrill Lynch stockbroker as we were getting married. Before that, she was a Pfizer pharmaceutical rep. And she even did some sales work in tech. As we were moving, she needed to change her world. She takes 15 years off to raise two fantastic daughters, build houses, project manage, just doing amazing things. And she goes back to work when our daughters were in high school. And these people thought they were savvy by calling her on her resume like, hey, you've been off 15 years. I got to tell you, that just really burns me up, that the view towards women who have taken time, or dads for that matter, who have taken time to care for their family members is just messed up. There's a lot to be gained by hiring those people. They have great organizational skills. They can multitask, which I can't. So I'm a big advocate for those people.
Especially when there's, obviously a great reason why there was that gap on unemployment. It wasn't she was laying on the beach somewhere being, had a full-time job raising the children and everything else. I mean, there's a great reason for that versus just, unexplainable gaps. They seem like they're totally different things.
Well, they are completely different things. Oh, and by the way, though, so now we're looking at these new generations of people who are reportedly less dedicated to the idea of sacrificing their entire life towards the idea of climbing the corporate ladder. They've seen their parents come home disappointed. They have a completely different upbringing than we did. And you can start criticizing that until you remember that our parents said the same thing about us and theirs before them. So there's so much here with a lot of these young people that maybe they've taken time to travel, maybe they've taken other things. But I'll tell you one thing, if you own a business, they are becoming your customers. So hiring these people that know that life and then finding the right mix of corporate dedication is there's some real benefit to having all of those new perspectives in our work world.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Charlie, what's something you've done recently that's helped you grow your business? You mentioned like virtual assistants. Is there some particular thing that's really helped you be able to scale?
Well, everything I do within my business and with my clients is usually around the idea of eliminating, automating, and delegating. I mean, those are the three things that you can do. And the biggest thing is most of us spend our lives doing so many things we don't need to be doing. So I do a lot of time management. As a matter of fact, a lot of times when I go to accounting firms, legal firms, construction companies, I often do a free time management workshop. As a matter of fact, I'll offer one here. If you guys ever want to put one on as part of your podcast, I'll do it and I give out all the tools, because this idea of being able to eliminate stuff that you really don't need to do, focusing on the things you're really great at, that you have a special niche that gives you joy, where you can add unique value, delegating the other stuff to virtual employees, bookkeepers, virtual assistants. And then there's so much you can do with free automation right now. Google mailboxes, Google Voice. I can give you 10 different free pieces of software that can give you back, a half hour a day a piece.
Right. Well, that's great. Yeah. I think it is critical. I mean, and I've really sort of been cognizant of it here recently is, taking back control of the calendar. Because if it's open, people put things every, 45 minutes, an hour, and then you'd never get any time to really work deep on any deep work. I remember Carl Newton's book was a deep work, was a fan of that, focused work is where you're going to make the breakthroughs versus just scattered. And people look, their email goes off and, it's every couple of seconds they get distracted.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. And so for all of you, since we're talking about time management, one of the sources I use is Michael Hyatt. This Free to Focus book is fantastic. It talks about how to find your special purpose. It talks about time blocking. So even though Focal Point gives me a whole curriculum of coaching, me and most other coaches in the industry, we borrow heavily from all the others. So if you ever want really good time management, I love Michael Hyatt.
Great. That's great. Yeah. I'm going to look that one up. I mean, the concepts are there, but again, if you're not continuing thinking about how to be efficient with your schedule, your calendar, and eliminate the noise, it fills right back up again. So you got to stay on top of it. Yeah.
There's two concepts I'll throw out here for you guys, and maybe we can have a deeper conversation on it later. But one is overcoming resistance to change. So most people aren't good at time management, not because they're not inherently born with it, but because they don't practice it. So there's this general formula, and Richard, we use this all the time without knowing it in organizational transformation when we were at Hyperion as an example. So there's, to every bit of change in an organization or with an individual, there's resistance, inertia, all that other stuff. So the three things you have to get better at something is you have to have a clear vision of how your life can be better if you get better at time, if you put time back in your pocket. You have to have some degree of dissatisfaction with the pace of your life, maybe how you're feeling, and you have to have a first step. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is just start small. So a key thing with time management is to have goals. The first thing I do in time management thing is in exercises is I have people set goals for what they want business success to look like, financial success, health, family, lifestyle, and faith, those four things. And ironically, when business owners come to me, or executives particularly, and they want to make more money or they want to get that promotion, a lot of times it's not the business stuff that I specialize in. It's really getting a better grip on their life with their family or their faith or their health.
Right.
They're not getting enough sleep. They're not drinking enough water. Simple stuff.
Right. Yeah, balance is what's important and around all those things. I mean, if you're so far tilted toward one area, everything else is going to suffer, and that's going to really eventually catch up with you. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So Charlie, what advice would you give somebody who's considering making a path change?
Know thyself. So I'd mentioned this story that I was thrilled with, and I hope you were too. I hope you laughed, you cried, driving across country, not knowing what I was going to do, buying coaching business, buying healthcare. That's not for everybody. So you have to, taking a hard assessment of what your goals in life are and what makes you happy. Specific, what is your area of awesome? The things that you both love doing and you tend to be better at than other people. So that's one thing, is really knowing that. And then paying a little bit of attention to your personality profile. So a lot of people in the corporate world have access to things called DISC profiles, for instance. So in the corporate world, if you're in the corporate world, you've probably taken those things. You know what your basic personality types, what your motivators are, and it's important to pay attention to that. But if you're not, hook up with somebody who can give you that type of assessment. So I use assessments from TTI out of Boston. They're the world's biggest one. They do personality assessments, motivation assessments, emotional intelligence. And I also have a book of assessments that I use with people who want to buy franchises called Zoracle profiles. So if anybody's out there and they want to try to figure out like what's the right path, contact me and I'll get you one of the profiles. And that might help you zero in on what you want to go off and do with the rest of your life. I took those things as well.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, absolutely, Charlie. Well, on that note, what is the best way for the listeners to reach out to you and find out about more what you do and offer?
No, I appreciate that. So I'm Charlie Janes on LinkedIn, and I post a lot of free materials there, short segments of seminars. So there's a lot of content that I like to share. That's part of building the relationship and credibility. My website is charliejanes.focalpointcoaching.com. Kind of catchy, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely. Rolls right off the tongue.
That's right. Well, we'll put links in the show notes to that also for your website. And we appreciate the conversation today, Charlie. We wish you continued success, and thank you so much for being on the Road Less Traveled show.
It was really fun. Thanks for the invite, and nice meeting you too. Or nice seeing you again, Richard. Nice meeting you, Bill.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on, Charlie. We really appreciate it. We'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in, and please give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to bring you more great content like Charlie Janes today. And we'd also like to thank the show sponsor, Park Capital Partners sponsors the show, as well as the Park Capital Value Add Fund, which is a 506C fund. And then finally, the Park Capital Partners Foundation, which is one of the ways we give back. And that is a 506C nonprofit. Thanks for being on, folks. We really appreciate you tuning in. And remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.